even as a declutter expert, messes are still normal. Messes are still going to happen. And so we need to certainly set these realistic expectations, but also be able to look at mess as a really cool thing. Like the mess in my kitchen is a reflection and side effect of just having time to connect with my family and gather or host friends over. And we make a mess, right? The dishes are there, the food, all the things. The living room furniture turned upside down and my kids turning the living room into a fort is a side effect of play, imagination, communication.
You're listening to the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast, just the thing we all said we needed when we first became parents, remember? Where's the handbook for this? I'm your host, Katy Kimball from Kids Cook Real Food, and I've brought together experts in the fields of health, parenting, nutrition, and more to help you, parents who truly want to raise healthy, independent kids, to get the information you need. Parenting is the toughest and most rewarding job in the world. Thanks for joining me to consult this Healthy Parenting Handbook, your guide to raising kids intentionally. My guest today is Katy Wells of the Maximized Minimalist podcast. And although we share the same name, we are very, very worlds apart in how cluttered our houses are. True confession from Katy Kimball. Katy Wells is a decluttering expert. It wasn't always this way. And I got to tell you, I'd never heard her story before, even though we've worked together for years. So I think you're really going to have your heartstrings pulled at the beginning. You'll have your mind challenged in the middle. And when we get to the end, there's so much good practical information that you can implement today to make your space more organized, less cluttered, and really more settled. We talk a little bit about anxiety and how that can be related to your spaces. And of course, it's the Healthy Parenting Handbook, so we're going to talk about how to get kids involved too. Your official introduction to Katy Wells. Through her best-selling declutter courses, the Clutter Cure, the Toy Clutter Cure, and the 14-Day Clutter Crusher Challenge, and her globally recognized Top 50 podcast, Katy inspires a grace-filled, practical, and self-affirming sense of, wow, I can really do this, for over 250,000 families across the world. She proves that by moving away from surface-level strategies and into deeper conversations to solve clutter problems at their root, even beginners can bypass overwhelm and self-doubt and instead generate exciting momentum as they move closer to creating a home they love that allows them to focus on what truly matters. Katy is a 3-time returning camp leader in our Life Skills Now Season 3 here in 2024, and I can't wait for you to meet her. Let's jump right in. Katy Wells, I have no idea how you have never been on my podcast because we've been working together for years, and I'm so glad to have you here on the Healthy Parenting Handbook.
Oh, Katy, so glad to be here. Love talking all things clutter, all things. I'm kind of obsessed, so let's go.
You do, and you are. And by the way, follow Katy on Instagram because she's full of tips, and it's always only about like decluttering in your home and your space. My guess is you don't have a college degree in decluttering. So where did this come from? Like, how did you get into this niche?
No college degree in decluttering. It would be funny to see if that's, an option as, my kids gear up to head into college 10 years or so. My story, I think I have a love-hate relationship with my story because it's equal parts like horrific. And also it's what got me to where I am today, both professionally and just personally as a mom and wife and all the things. And really my decluttering story starts back in November 2017 when my family and I, my husband and 2 sons who were 2 and 1 at the time, were hit in a head-on car accident. And for the next probably 12 hours after this car accident, I didn't know if my husband was going to survive. So I'm waiting in the lobby. And to give you some context, before this car accident, I thought as a mom, a wife, and just a human being, I was at the rock bottom of my rock bottom. I hated my home. I was overwhelmed with clutter and mess all the time. I was resentful towards my little kids and my husband for making my job as a home stuff manager a million times harder. My quality time spent with my kids was literally just chasing after them, picking up their Legos or dirty socks or, sippy cups. And, when I came home after an exhaustingly long day at work, I wanted to come home to a safe spot that I could relax, that was a refuge in the storm instead of a tidal wave that sucked me under. And, all of these things led to some chronic anxiety, chronic depression, which I now know that there are numerous studies out there that suggest that clutter can absolutely contribute to a lot of mental health issues, depression, anxiety, stress, just to name a few. Not always the cause, that's not what I'm saying, but it absolutely can contribute. And I was just, waking up every day felt like Groundhog Day. And while I had a lot to be grateful for, I really struggled. I was just struggling on a very just deep level. I felt like a failure. Like, why can't I have a home that looks like this Pinterest board that I have, like my aspirational home? What's wrong with me? I'm smart. Why can't I figure this out? Why do all the other moms have a tidy home and kids that can clean their room and all these things? And then this car accident happened. And after the doctor came in and said, Katy, Andrew's going to survive, but he's going to need surgery. It's going to be a really long road of recovery, but just get home. You need to rest, like go home to your babies. And I'll never forget, Katy, I walked through my front door. Two of my best friends at the time drove me home from the hospital, and I opened the front door and we walked in, and I saw my home for what it really was, which was just chaos. I mean, every single surface area, there's toys on the floor, there's rice on the floor from like 2 nights ago at dinner time, And yes, part of this is the season of life I was in, working full time out of the home, 2 kids under 2. I'm not going to downplay that. That's a tough season, whether you struggle with clutter or not. But it was, what hit me and literally felt like a gut punch was that this was now a distraction. Overwhelmingly obvious distraction from what I wanted to do when I was spending at home, which was to cuddle my babies, and take care of them and figure out how to be a single parent while my husband's bedridden for the next several months. And then the second completely unexpected feeling, another gut punch. It was like Mortal Kombat, like the total knockout, like boom, boom, bow. And that was shame. I was so embarrassed that I didn't get that call 10 minutes in advance. Hey, can I stop over? And I didn't get to throw all my junk and clutter into the spare room in my house. And so I really felt like I was embarrassed. This is my home. And my girlfriends, even though we were really close, didn't know that like I was a secret slob and I couldn't manage my home properly. And so I was spiraling. I felt guilty, ashamed, resentful. And then I just said to myself, I will never feel this way ever again. I'm going to do whatever it takes to figure this out because I need to be with my kids and my family. And I want to be with them forever. I want to be able to be present. I want to be able to not be distracted by all this chaos and all this extra junk in my home. And so I read all the books as we do. I read Spark Joy. I got on Pinterest. I downloaded all the checklists. But just because my why was now big enough didn't mean that it was all like I saw success, right? There wasn't rainbows and unicorns and my home didn't magically transform because I decided I was going to do it. So much of the content out there, and still to this day, is focused on perfection and you have to do it perfectly and marathon decluttering and all these different strategies. I'm like, this isn't working. I have maybe 2 minutes before the baby wakes up. I don't have 6 hours in my day to declutter and ask what sparks joy. And so all these methods were failing. And it was really through this, like my why and the grit I just created and the resilience, because I couldn't let myself fail anymore. I needed to figure this out. And I needed to figure out without a ton of extra time on my hands, no extra time on my hands. And so this is when I came up with a lot of the principles and strategies that ultimately began to work for me. And I felt like, dang, I cracked the code. Like, okay, now I need to teach this to other people. And through this, obviously, depression and anxiety, so much better. I feel like I went from a Katy 1.0 to a Katy 2.0 in just happiness and stress levels, more presence, all the things that so many of us ultimately innately crave in life, but that clutter gets in the way of. They just started to be there for me. And it radically transformed my life, my relationship with my partner, my kids, how I show up in the world and all these different things. And so that's a long-winded way of sharing how I got into the declutter space and why I'm so passionate about teaching other families and parents out there that it is possible. You can have a messy partner or messy kids, and you can still have a simpler home, and it doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be worthwhile. Your home certainly doesn't need to look like a museum. That's not the end goal. Your home will look and feel better. Absolutely. But this is about creating a home that is supportive to you and your family. And we make messes, and, we can embrace that. One thing that I discovered is that there can actually be such beauty in mess. And it literally brings tears to my eyes every time I talk about this, because you go on a Pinterest board and it's like declutter your kitchen. You're looking at these $500,000 kitchens, that I certainly could never afford. And it's like nothing on the countertops. It looks so unrealistic. Like, no, but does anyone live there? Everything is perfectly tidy. And then I look at mine, and even as a declutter expert, messes are still normal. Messes are still going to happen. And so we need to certainly set these realistic expectations, but also be able to look at mess as a really cool thing. Like the mess in my kitchen is a reflection and side effect of just having time to connect with my family and gather or host friends over. And we make a mess, right? The dishes are there, the food, all the things. The living room furniture turned upside down and my kids turning the living room into a fort is a side effect of play, imagination, communication, problem solving. Hey, how are we going to build the fort? Well, I think it should be done this way. Oh, I think it should be done this way. And I'm hearing these conversations with my kids and going, wow, this is so awesome. I love this. And I don't know, I think it's really this nuance of like expectation, kind of going counterculture with some of those expectations and finding an end goal that works for us. Again, it's a home is a home. It's not a museum. And the cultural standards, especially that are portrayed for women and the pressure we feel to quote unquote keep a home is just, you can declutter those and you'll already feel so much more freedom and so liberated.
Well, that is a beautiful vision. And I really appreciate the balance that you bring to the decluttering space, which is why your Instagram is so uplifting and everyone should definitely follow you there. Your story was far more intense than I anticipated. And also, I can't even imagine that you ever had a cluttered home. So this is, it's very, very interesting to hear. And I think it makes what you teach feel more realistic because again, this morning, I'm thinking about coming into an interview with Katy Wells, Maximize Minimalist, and I'm looking around my house like, I don't know how to do this, and we'll kind of get into maybe my junk a little bit later because I have some real life examples that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But let's start with definitions. It seems like, in the olden days, 50s, 70s, whatever, you'd do things, maybe you would straighten, maybe you would organize or clean, and they did spring cleaning. But I don't think decluttering or minimalism were words decades ago. So What are they and where did they come from?
Yeah, I think decluttering goes beyond like traditional cleaning and it's different than organizing, right? So it's important to know like, hey, if you want to do decluttering or organizing, like you need to know what the purpose of it is and how it actually can support you in reaching your goals. And so decluttering is really simple at the end of the day. It is about reducing the items in your home. And so you can focus on the ones that do add value, make your life easier, spark joy, have sentimental value, all the things. And also like your family, like the people under your roof and yourself, right? Taking care of yourself. And so when we're able to remove that excess, oh my gosh, not only do we save time and energy, but again, a whole heap of other benefits come with that. And minimalism, I think, really follows this idea, but applies it typically more broadly to different lifestyle choices, like promoting less consumption, living more intentionally. Intentional is like a really big word. And it's important, I think, for all of us, whether you want to be a minimalist or not. And I think these concepts have, various roots and, cultural traditions, but gained popularity over the last couple of decades. I think part of that goes hand in hand with clutter is a huge problem. I mean, we have more accessibility, we have credit cards, we have more disposable income, or we just have credit cards to put, to constantly buy things. I was actually just listening to a podcast last week, and it was talking about how especially the younger generation, so I'm 36, so people born in the 90s and 2000s feel that it's like they don't want to wear a piece of clothing more than once. And they have been kind of grown up in this culture where it's normal to wear a t-shirt and then throw it out and go buy a new one because it's quote unquote only $5 or only $3. And it is just, so culture really impacts a lot of this. And it's really driven clutter up in so many households. That's just a simplification. There's so many roots to our clutter, but that's certainly a big part of the conversation. And so, the reality is things are always going to be coming into our home, whether it's, oops, I bought something at Target when I went for kitty litter, but I came home with a cart of $200, or it's consumables or things that are intentional purchases. But just because we buy something doesn't mean that we're supposed to keep it forever. And I'm not here to say like, oh yeah, just get rid of it. And just because like, we don't want to waste things. But it is a very valuable life skill for us to learn as adults and also to teach our kids, like when does something become clutter? It's a conversation we have, in our household. Well, when does something become clutter, right? Have we ever talked to our kids about this? No, but we were like, hey, go declutter your toys because I'm over it and I stepped on a toy and I'm so mad.
You've defined the roots, I think, really, really well. And I think of my mother-in-law who grew up with, 8 kids in their family, eating out of the garden, like a lower socioeconomic status for sure, just because most people were like the working class didn't have a lot. And so you made do, you figured things out, you built a lot of skills like gardening and canning, right?
Yeah.
And then when she became an adult, and this is the 70s and 80s, and had, good job, the middle class was just different. We had a little more money. Goods were less expensive. She would buy any deal that she'd come across. Anything that's a deal, like you have to buy it. And it felt like almost like a pendulum or a rubber band effect from her childhood, right? You didn't have much. And so now you can have more. So you get more. And then that created that culture of excess that you and I were born into. Yeah. And now we're like, oh my gosh, that's too much. It's crazy. It's stressful. It's wasteful. Whew, we're like pulling that pendulum back. Like, let's just be minimalists and not, not buy so much. I'm still reeling from the fact that people actually would buy something, wear it once and get rid of it. But that might explain why I feel like everyone's better at laundry than me because all their shirts are new. They're not even doing the laundry. I get it now. It's been revealed. It's just so interesting you say that because I teach a class in our Life Skills Now season 3 that we'll talk about later too on good stewardship. Like I'm big on kind of reduce, reuse, recycle, and reduce is first for a reason. It's let's buy fewer things so that we have fewer things in the world because everything ultimately becomes trash at the end of its life cycle. Almost, there's reusing and there's recycling, but ultimately we create a lot of trash when we buy more stuff. So for me, it's like an earth thing. For you, I know it's a space thing. You said we don't usually teach our kids what clutter is. So let's do that. What is clutter?
So I have always taught my kids who are now 7 and 9, but years ago, and I still use the same definition, try and keep it as simple as possible, which I think there is beauty in simplicity, right? Which is why we're having this conversation anyway. But clutter to me is anything that we no longer use, need, or want. And now that they're a touch older, I've added on or is a reflection of who you are or want to be, which they're kind of gaining context to as their hobbies and their interests change. For example, my 9-year-old, when he was 6, he didn't really like to read much. A little bit here and there. We'd go to the library, he'd read it enough. But now he's like, I'm a reader, right? That is part of his identity. And so to a reader, you tend to do things that readers would do, right? Because identity drives behavior. So now that he's a reader, guess what he loves to do? He loves to go to the library, but he also loves to accumulate books. And so we go to the used bookstore and he'll buy and trade in his books, right? So we have this like new system in. But just those simple definitions have really helped my kids just have a understanding of what clutter is. And he can read a book and go, you know what? I want to reread that. I'm going to keep it. Or, you know what? Let's be honest. I heard him tell himself this the other day. He's like kind of just having a conversation with himself in his room as he's going through some stuff. He goes, I don't really see myself reading this again. So I'm going to put it in my donate bin. And I was like, yes, these are the conversations I want my kids to be having in their head versus going, oh, I don't know. What if I let that go and decide to read it again? Or, this fear of loss of identity, which I think a lot of us adults feel more than the kids. And so in a nutshell, that's a really great starting point when we're talking to our kids about clutter. And again, going to the point I said earlier, just because we bought something, and it served us or our family 6 months ago, 6 years ago, it doesn't mean it's still doing that. And so having this definition kind of front of mind when we're going throughout our day, spending time in our household, opening the silverware drawer, doing chores, doing laundry, and going, do I really need this anymore? I've had the opportunity to use this in the last 6 months and I haven't. So, it can go into the donation bin.
Sure. So anything that we no longer use, need, or want. And then you said, or is a reflection of who you are or want to be. Did you mean is longer?
Not. Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Because I was typing and I'm like, it feels like this should be not a reflection. All right. Well then, so Katy, but why bother decluttering and getting rid of stuff if we can just stay organized, if we just have enough bookshelves or we have enough baskets?
Oh, famous last words, right?
No!
I think a lot of us, and this was me too, again, I'm like, I'm going to simplify my life. I didn't use the word declutter. I just knew my house needed to be fixed, and we are taught, again, culture, capitalism. We are taught we can buy our way out of a clutter problem. Cue organization bins. My go-to was Pinterest is showing me I just need new bins or I need clear ones. Mine aren't see-through right now, so that's the problem. Then once I have these bins in place, it'll solve the issue. It won't. That's the reality. And if we're lucky, it's a temporary fix. But for me, I was so far gone and had so much clutter, it didn't even fix that. The issue is still there. It's still overwhelming. And again, going back to, things are still going to be coming into your home. So it's like we need to get more comfortable being able to let stuff go. And again, it's not about being wasteful. It's about being, putting intention into crafting a home environment that is supportive to us, and our family. And I think if you look at your house, like your home as like a family member, when your family member is doing something you don't want them to do, you probably notice it, right? If your home is has a storage unit and housing all this stuff that isn't supporting you, you're going to feel that. But you are in control of what is in your home. So I would encourage everyone to flip that. If your default, like so many of us, is to organize, to shift it to your default being decluttering, you will make so much progress. And it is like a muscle you have to flex, right? Because you'll be like, oh, there's too much clutter. I need a new file unit or I need a new bookcase. But instead going, you know what? I could actually just probably let go of a few of these books on this bookshelf and make some more space to bring in some books that I love and I want to read and that I actually see myself reading. Or heck, just to enjoy the space, because white space is good too for our brains. I think that's a really beautiful and important life lesson.
Just quickly interrupting, which is not a very good life skill, is it? We should teach our kids not to interrupt. I have to tell you about Life Skills Now Season 3, happening June 24th through 28th, 2024. Life Skills Now has been an incredible virtual summer camp, completely free. The moment you register, you get access to 13 workshops that you can use all the way until June. And then the 24th to the 28th, we host 100 plus virtual workshops teaching kids ages 5 to 18 hands-on and minds-on life skills. Categories include entrepreneurship, communication, tech savviness, hands-on like woodworking, cooking, and gardening. It's out of this world. And I just have to give you a couple previews of what your kids will get to learn. They'll get to learn how to be polite, how to start conversations, a couple different videos on making snacks and breakfast, and even how to break down a whole chicken from a guy who's a huge wilderness expert and reality TV show participant. We're taking you into the workshop to make a pencil holder and also for our teens to learn to use a power drill. In finances, we're talking about compound interest and teaching kids how we pay for things. Cash, cards, flicks, taps. What does it all mean when we can't always see money changing hands. And then we have a lot of mental stuff too, like overcoming your power blocks, setting goals for teens, creating a clutter-free study zone and why that's going to make a difference in your kids' focus as they're working. We also have stuff for you, the parents, in our preschool track and our parenting professional development track, as well as our neurodivergent track for families. And you know what? It's at the bottom of my list, but it should never be last. We have a wellness track too, that covers both physical and mental wellness. And I just used Dr. Jihan's, one of her tools to stop being nervous with my little one this morning because he has his standardized testing. Life Skills Now Season 3 is going to be amazing. I know I've talked too long, but I'm just so pumped about the depth and breadth of all of these workshops. Go immediately to kidscookworldfood.com/lifeskills. Sign up your whole family. It's free. You can get started on 13 workshops right away. And I'm so excited to share that with you.
I think that's a really beautiful and important life lesson.
It is. And I'm sure that our kids need to hear it, that we're actually happier with less stuff. It is not the message of the world. The world says we're happier with more stuff, more expensive stuff, and more. I want to hear some ugly stories. So as you work with women around the world, Katy, what are the biggest clutter pain points? Like, what are the worst rooms or spaces?
I would say from a space perspective, areas that tend to host like all the family members, like kitchens, entryways, playrooms, closets, garages. Most people have what I call a doom room. It's, garage, basement, attic. So or even a guest bedroom. It's like the catch-all space. Everything gets shoved, when guests are coming over and that type of thing. And that certainly, again, it can feel very daunting for people. I mean, I've had women with PhDs. I've had, lawyers, all these different people with different professions go like, Katy, I very smart. I'm very driven professionally, but I struggle with clutter. So it's clutter impacts everyone. And, going back to what we talked about earlier, that is so often unaddressed in this space, which I am changing, is the roots of clutter. Because here's the thing, you and I, the double Katys, we can be like incredible declutter ninjas. We can be like, no sentimental value. I'm just going to get rid of it. Whatever. I'm really good at getting rid of stuff. But going back to the reduce, reuse, recycle, right? If we never focus on our shopping habits, which I would say is one of the number one reasons why we have clutter to begin with, is again, we are trained from the moment we were watching Saturday morning cartoons as a kid. Now there's so many more mediums, internet, social media, influencers telling us and our kids, hey, you will be happy when you have this. You'll be more beautiful. You will be more successful. You will be more happy when you have this skincare routine or this or this or this. And we feel subconsciously, our brain starts to believe that we can buy our way into a happier life. Cue more clutter coming into our home. And so for me, a big part of my success personally, before I even started teaching this professionally, was first of all, identifying the different roots of my clutter and being able to declutter some of these beliefs that I adopted from culture, from people I admired, from what I thought society wanted me to be, or from even some of my perfectionistic tendencies were getting in the way of my success. And it's interesting, right? The biggest change that happens when we declutter our home isn't the change that happens within our walls. It's the change that happens between our ears. And it's that change that's going to move the needle and make the most progress, right? I often say it's a muscle. You have to build it. And it's true. You get better at decluttering the more you do it. But really, I often find with working with students that they often need to declutter some of the beliefs in their head in order to declutter the stuff that they've been unable up until that point to let go of. So it's so much like that. What's that quintessential quote? Mind over matter. Like we have to focus on that. We can't undermine that. If checklists worked, and this grinds my gears, if checklists worked, no one would be here right now. Your home would be great. My home would be great. I never would have to go through 2 years of trying to figure out how to declutter. And the world just oversimplifies it. Like, here's a checklist. Your problems are solved. Similar to weight loss. It's like, here's a checklist to lose weight and, gain muscle. And then we go, well, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? Why can everyone else figure this out? But everyone struggles with the same stuff, And I think just getting more introspective, with why we're shopping, how stuff is coming into our home. And of course, setting up systems and habits on the back end to get the clutter out. But we have to it's more of like this holistic decluttering. It's not just like, oh, here's a checklist and your house is going to be, picture perfect. That doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, you're right that there is a lot of mental work and a lot of kind of deep internal work to be done. If you were to scan someone's room, and maybe if you could do that, mysteriously through through their eyes, how do you help people decipher what is that expected mess? You called the beauty in the mess that we can appreciate versus just true clutter that we need to get rid of. Do you have any litmus tests for that?
Yeah. So I really break down clutter. So now that we know a general definition, here's the thing. I mean, in the clutter space, I would say you hear more, there's different definitions. So pick a definition that works for you. The one I gave is kind of very simplistic, but some people might say clutter is anything that leads to a feeling of disorganization, or clutter is anything that I don't love or use or need, or that doesn't represent who I am anymore type thing. So I say that to offer different definitions can motivate people in different ways. And that's a great test, right? Like if it falls in or doesn't fall in your definition, that's a really quick guideline for you to be able to identify what to do with it. But from a clutter perspective, it's kind of like an onion, right? The easiest layer, the outside layer is the easiest one to peel off and get rid of. So clutter in 3 different layers. So you have your superficial outside layer, and that is a clutter that is clutter. There's no arguing about it. It's easy to let go of. Your knee-jerk reaction is this is excess, it's broken, it's unneeded, it's unwanted. It's usually not a lack of skill or mindset or strategy. It's just you need to devote time to letting go of that. So that's the easiest one to let go of. And here's the thing, Katy, most people are really good about decluttering. And when they're like, I'm going to spend some time decluttering, that's the clutter they handle. But that's in most homes a very small percentage of the clutter, maybe 10 to 20%. So imagine 10 to 20% is gone. And that's why people say, in next week or even a couple days later, the clutter is back. It's because there's deeper layers, right? So then underneath superficial, there is what I call scarcity clutter. So scarcity clutter is the type of thing, I'll hang on to this just in case. This was a good deal. I don't want to let it go. What if I need this in the future? This could come in handy. Well, what if I lose the 10 pounds and then these jeans fit again, right? And again, I'm not saying you just declutter all of that. I'm saying this is a type of thing that would fall into that category. Think of a junk drawer. Okay. These were popular in the Midwest. And I guess I recently found out that's not just the Midwest. I'm from Iowa originally. Everyone has them, right? Mine looks a lot different than it used to. And I certainly don't call it a junk drawer anymore, but just to give you an idea of something that, would fall in that category. And then, in the heart of the matter, literally the 3rd layer, the deepest, the core layer is what I call sentimental clutter. It's something we've all heard about, but this is really where sentiment or emotions or our identity keeps us stuck, hanging on to things that we probably know deep down are clutter and that aren't serving us, but through guilt, again, sentiment, emotions, whatever you want to call it, it's hindering us. So I walk women through, again, if we want to solve a problem, you tackle the easiest thing first. What's the low-hanging fruit? So you always have to start with the superficial clutter. But there are a nuance and arsenal of different tools and skills. Just like a woodworker, if they're building a home, they're not just going to use a hammer and, hit a 4x4. You have nails, you have power drills, you have wrenches, you have all these different things. And so that's really when I come in as a coach, whether it's through a program or different resources of mine where I can go, hey, this is where you're going to deploy this strategy to tackle this type of clutter, or this is where this one can come in handy. And it's really just going about it in a really strategic way that builds momentum. It offers hope and it moves the needle. It gets them closer to creating a room that they want to have. Maybe that's turning their basement into a workout space and making it functional for their family. Or maybe it's just not tripping over mountains of laundry in order to do laundry, you know? So the goals all look different, but ultimately they're the same. It's to simplify.
Well, I love that you give people systems. And I have to say, Katy has an incredible, very high ranked podcast, and it's organized into like beginner, momentum, streamline. Yes. Also, like, so if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could hear more about that thing that Katy just said, like listen to her podcast because we only have so much time in here. But because we're talking to parents in the Healthy Parenting Handbook, we got to talk kid stuff.
Yeah.
How do you get your kids to help clean up?
Teach them how to do it.
That's it? Really?
And here's why I say that. It's like, oh, well, that's such an obvious answer. But I used to tell my kids, pick up your toys. And I just expected them to know how to do it. I never actually taught my kids anything. I just said, pick up your toys. And I wondered, well, why is there such resistance or confusion? And it's like, part of it was I just didn't teach them how to do it. Oh, River, you pick up the green blocks and put them in this bin. Levi, you pick the red blocks and I'll start with the purple blocks. And so you start small, you teach them how to do it. You support them with ongoing conversation, modeling, and understanding that it's not a one-off conversation, or even a one-off, like, here, I'm going to sit with you and do it. And then it's like, you get to wipe your hands clean of it. But I think, teaching them the how is important, but also the why can be beneficial depending on their age, right? Because if kids don't understand the why, it can be annoying. It's like, well, I have to clean my room because mom told me, or dad told me, or grandma told me. But instead, what I used to do, especially in common the gathering spaces in our home, like the living room or the kitchen, I'd say we all need to do our part, whatever that looks like. You need to bring your dirty dishes to the counter, all these different things, so that I have more time to read you bedtime stories at night. And then my kids would go, oh, I want that. Right. Or so I have more time to give you some more snuggles tonight, or that we can take a bubble bath instead of a shower, right? All the things that really would motivate my kids. This is how we can do them if you help me. And it doesn't have to take a long time. It doesn't have to be this huge, extensive project. But also I think just knowing for them, my kids felt, I think it's so important for you to be there, like in the room with them, especially in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Like what I would typically do after I taught them for the first few weeks is I would start with them and then quietly remove myself from the process. And, a few minutes later, it was done. And again, the less clutter, less toys you have, the quicker that toy pickup happens too. It used to take me, Katy, guess how long it took me to pick up our toys before I decluttered?
Minutes?
30 minutes.
Oh, man.
30 minutes.
That's why I would just leave them out.
I did a lot of nights. Yeah. Just like, well, what's the point? Right.
But like you said, if that, research proven increases our anxiety, we're in a conundrum.
And even, bringing that into how it impacts kids. I mean, I hear time and time from parents who go through my toy course or just decide I'm just going to declutter the toys. Like, hey, my kids are getting along better. Or my daughter, one of my moms cleaned out, helped her daughter, declutter her whole room. And it was like the before and after, it was just like, it looked like it belonged in a magazine. And her daughter, up until that point, had like refused to sleep in her room. She would have nightmares, and her mom thought, oh, that's so weird. And by no means did they declutter for that reason. But guess what? Her daughter started sleeping in her room and wanted to spend time in her room, play with her dolls, instead of bring all of her toys and stuff to the living room, which drove the mom nuts too, right? And so there are so many benefits. I mean, it's good for us as adults, but it's also really great for our kids. And it forces them, just like a lot of us, like, again, growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it's like when we were bored, my mom was like, there's nature, go outside, there's sticks. And now we feel all this pressure to like constantly keep our kids entertained. And, we're marketed like, hey, if you buy this toy for your kid, they'll be a genius or an Einstein baby, all these things. And then we're like, oh, I got to teach my kid to read by the time they're 2, or my kid's behind, right? And I'm just like, forget it. Like, the more simple, the better. The dirtier my kids get, the better, assuming we're outside, and it's just like embracing the simplicity of it all. But going back to your conversation, I think, again, teaching them the how, supporting and teaching them the why is a really important part of the conversation that often gets missed.
Yeah, those tips are gold. I mean, it's so practical and so doable. I love that you would like slyly just begin to remove yourself
Yeah.
from the situation, and you keep it really simple. And that story about the girl in her bedroom, I feel like, yeah, in uncluttered spaces, we feel safer. Like our nervous system feels safer because there's not so much to look at. And I would say, particularly for parents of neurodivergent kids, whether that's autism or ADHD, if we can reduce the visual stimuli coming in, they're going to feel safer, less anxious, and be able to focus better. So that is a huge motivator. Speaking of safety, let's talk about the kitchen. Do you have any tips to organize the kitchen for both safety, but also allowing kids to be involved?
Yes. So back in 2020, I found you through your cooking course, and, creating a kitchen that my kids could help me cook in and was safe for them, and also effective for me to get the job done. Cooking and cleaning is obviously important. So my best advice is to create different zones in your kitchen. So safe zones that kids can reach. And a lot of parents probably already do this. Some of us do this innately. I actually discovered this because when my kids were little and I was cooking, like a lot of us experience, they open the bottom drawer that they can access. And I was like, oh, that's stuff you probably don't want to play with. So I shifted things around, the pots and the pans, sure, a couple of those, some silicone utensils they could play, and that was their way of, being nearby mom, which they loved. Obviously keeping things, like knives, any sharp things up on higher grounds. We used a lot of the magnetic, it was a magnet we just kept on the fridge, and then it had a lock on all of our Lazy Susan, anything that was accessible, but like maybe had Pyrex glassware, stuff like that I don't want my kids getting into. So just kind of looking at your home in a way of like, how can I keep it safe for my kids, but also make things accessible to them? Assuming that they're going to be helping you in the kitchen in some way, shape, or form, whether that looks like putting dishes away. I've known parents and have students of mine who move their dishes from an upper cabinet, like they're traditionally stored, to a lower one, right? Just so their kids could help, put the dishes away after the dishwasher. So if that's something you want to do, you can always, look into shifting those bigger things around. But I think that's important.
Yeah. And even if the kids, I know in our kitchen, there's some sort of more kid friendly, the smaller dishes or the metal instead of the glass, even if they can unload half of the dishwasher, but then you're doing it together instead of them saying, Mom, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? I heard an expert on a different podcast not about decluttering or anything, saying, come on, parents, you don't need to do the dishes all the time. Go outside and climb that tree with their kids.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, isn't that just lovely? You get all warm fuzzies and I just want to go climb the tree. But if you did that every day and never did the dishes, like how is that sustainable? So that's like aspirational advice, but it's not practical more than once.
Right.
But
it's just like we talk about all the time with life skills, right? It's, you do it as a team, you rotate, how it works in your family. And then everyone goes outside and play. I can't tell you. And I know we share a similar audience where it's like, the mom's like, I am so tired of my husband coming home from work or my partner, and they get all the fun time with the kids. And I'm over here in the kitchen, or I'm doing this, that, and all these chores. And I go, that's a choice. And so I worked with her and she goes, you know what? I said, we're going to do this together. We made the mess. I'm not doing this anymore on my own. And she goes, it took 5 minutes for all 4 of us to clean up the mess. And then we all went outside, or we all played the board game. And I said, this is like a life hack, right? Life is short. I don't want to live motherhood resentful. I can do all these things. I can do my kids' laundry. I can clean the baseboards. I can do all the decluttering, but I don't want to do all that stuff. I want to teach them that so that I have more, not only so they learn the life skills, but I have more time and energy to be present, hang out, go climb a tree. Our family traveled to Italy in 2019 and learned about, I think I'm saying this right, it's called a passeggiata. At least that's how we pronounce it. It's like very common in Europe, or specifically in Italy. You have a dinner and then you go take a walk outside. And so that's something we do in the spring, summer, fall here. We eat dinner, we wrap it up together, we reset the kitchen, and then we go take a passeggiata, right? And it is a beautiful thing. Now, years ago, I would have been like, y'all go ahead. I'll stay behind. And missed out on all those memories. And it feels so good to, again, and your home doesn't need to be perfectly decluttered or perfectly tidy or perfectly organized in order for you to have that aspirational, dream. And I certainly don't want to paint that picture because my home's not perfect, but I think it's cool when, again, it's like, well, how else would I spend my time? What would my life look like? It's just little day-to-day things, because it's certainly, we kind of get in these grooves and ruts, and it's like we feel like, oh, it's just the way it is, or my home's going to be a disaster until my kid's 18 and moves out, or 25
you're just resurrecting
and moves out.
Time.
Yes, and I'm like, no, like I don't know. I can think differently, and I can choose differently.
Yeah, it's just reorganizing the time. If you would do a chore as mom for 20 minutes, and your kids get 20 minutes to play, rather than, like you said, 4 people do the job in 5 minutes and everybody has 15 minutes to be together bonding. Like, the number of minutes don't need to be long. Like, that's 10 extra minutes one-on-one with a child or one-on-two with your children is powerful, particularly if it happens day after day. And I heard you say, I don't want to raise kids who don't know how to do their laundry. Or you said, I don't want to do all their laundry, but I think you don't want to raise kids who have parents who do all their laundry, because those are entitled kids who grow up to be kind of bratty and not very independent. So we definitely want to raise kids who see everyone working together as a team. And you're going to teach some awesome skills in our Life Skills Now Summer Camp Season 3. First of all, Katy Wells has been one of the top ranked camp leaders in seasons 1 and 2, and she helped kids in a couple different ways learn to clean their room. What are you teaching this year?
Oh, I can't wait. Okay. This year I'm teaching on how to create a clutter-free study zone. So especially fruitful, whether you're a homeschooler, private, doesn't matter where you go to school, public, anywhere. This is going to be really beneficial for all the kids out there who are kind of hitting those homework years. I mean, elementary, middle school, high school, and even some, hey, I work from home, and a lot of the things that I taught in that class are really applicable to us parents too, who just need a space to, produce something, whether that's homework or work. So, it's a really great, wonderful class. I can't wait for, the people attending the summit to get their hands on it. It's going to be really fruitful.
Yes. Katy does a fantastic job talking to the kids in their language, but being really, go figure, organized about how she presents information and the little habits and practices and loops to implement. Now, we're almost out of time, but I teased at the beginning that we were going to talk about some of my clutter, and so we just have to spend like a minute. One of my biggest struggles is that clutter that you've alluded to a few times, that things keep coming into our house. Even I am not a shopper. I do not have a shopping problem. I have a keeping problem. But there's also, the mail keeps coming and the schoolwork keeps coming home and my kids will bring things home. So I looked around my surfaces today in the main area of the house and I saw, well, there's the package of lavender that one of our other camp leaders sent me that I need to use to demonstrate her lavender simple syrup. Well, I don't know. I don't have a place for random lavender to be used in a workshop, right? Yeah. And there's the personalized towel that my mother-in-law gave me for Christmas 4 months ago that's white. And I'm like, if I put that in circulation and we actually use it in my kitchen, it will be shades of red and mud really quickly. So it deserves to be on a wall, but then I'd have to buy a apparatus and hang it on the wall. So there it sits on our coffee table for 4 months. So what do you do with the uncategorizable stuff that you can't quite get rid of? Or am I supposed to get rid of the personalized towel? Like, Katy, I'm a mess.
Yeah, those are tricky, right? And that's typically like guilt. Like if you said your mother-in-law, right? So you're like, oh, you're thinking, oh, she took the time, the effort. It was a well-intentioned gift. And now it's like, is she going to ask about it? All the things. So there's 1,000,001 ways to handle this on the front end and the back end. But typically, if I receive a gift, and this makes me sound cold-hearted, but I'm really not. Like, I know very quickly if it's going to be used or not. And so I have no problem putting it straight into my donation bin. I typically make that choice almost immediately versus shuffling it around from pile to countertop to table, really delaying the inevitable.
It drains your emotional
feeling
energy.
Guilty. Yeah, the entire
touching.
Yes, every time. Oh, and it doesn't make you feel good. Oh, one more thing I have to figure out what to do with. So that's typically what I do for stuff like that. And I think you can obviously have conversations with people. You can still, and it doesn't mean like you're not honoring them or you're not appreciative of the gift. So I think we need to dispel that myth. Like if you're like, hey, I appreciate her. This is a super sweet gift, but I'm going to donate it. Someone else out there, maybe named Katie Kimball, will find it. You never know. Or Katie. Is it your initials? Is it the actor? Is it the?
I think it's my husband and I and our wedding date. Like it's the whole deal. But even as I'm listening to myself say it to you, I'm thinking we just should use it.
Or put it in your master bathroom, right? Where it's not going to be like, used in the kitchen. You can, you're probably not going to like frame it or display it or repurpose it. But hey, if you just put it in your master bathroom where it's going to be relatively clean, then do that, right? And enjoy it and embrace it, and it'll live a long, good life. And it'll spark joy, so that's cool too. So use it absolutely is always going to be an option. And there are things, to your point of that come into your home and kind of are there temporarily, or you're just not sure what to do with it. The more comfortable you can get with having temporary home for things, I think the better. Any organization or declutter expert out there, most of them say everything has to have a home. Yes, that's true. And I think there is value in having a temporary housing spot for things. I don't think that temporary housing spot should be necessarily, in the middle of your kitchen island or on your kitchen table where you're eating dinner and all that stuff.
I see.
But you can make a home maybe in an entryway, a little bit in an entryway, or your junk drawer could be turned into a temporary home where you regularly check it and keep things you need temporarily until you go, is this worth my time and energy devoting, a permanent home, roughly, short-term, long-term, whatever that looks like. And I think, again, as long as you're revisiting that space and auditing it and going, I don't need this. Time has done the heavy lifting for me. I can let it go. Or you know what? I've been using this. It would make more sense to store it here for function and efficiency and all that stuff. So
what I'm hearing you say is that make faster decisions.
Yeah, 100%.
That's probably a tip to take away for people who struggle with clutter is make the decision once. You say Ohio, only handle it once,
yes,
right?
Ohio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, Katy, I love to leave parents with a super practical step that they can accomplish right away. We've talked a lot about what's between our ears and our philosophy and our thinking and some really deep work. But what if parents could get one quick win today after this podcast ends? What should they do?
Focus on consistently getting rid of stuff, decluttering, through what I call clutter audits. So the beauty about clutter audits is they take seconds to do, and they are micro declutter sessions you attach to any of your other habits you already have. Chores, laundry, dishes, cleaning, all the things, wherever you are doing that habit, laundry room, any space in your home, you pick just a few things that are easy, superficial, low-hanging fruit, clutter that you can put away. And I guess I should say, the more consistent with these you can be, the better. And one thing I love to dovetail with clutter audits, because it's helpful to have, is a donation bin. So I would say maybe even trumping that as number one, establish a visible and accessible bin or bag or empty Amazon cardboard box. It doesn't have to be fancy, somewhere in your home on a main level or any spot where you're going to be doing some decluttering. That can be your dedicated bin for all the donatables. This has made such a huge difference in my house, as nuanced and silly as it sounds, but procrastination typically kicks in when we are going throughout our chores and going, oh, that's clutter. Oh, I don't have time to declutter right now. I'll leave it there for another day. And that day never comes, the clutter builds. But if you have a donation bin, all you have to do is pick it up, plop it in there. And as soon as that fills up, you head to the donation center. If you teach your family how to use a donation bin, it can spark conversation around clutter. And hey, do we need to do a clutter audit today? Or, do we need to do some decluttering as a family? There are just so many benefits to both permanent donation bin and clutter audits.
Nice. And just little habits, quick things we can implement that honestly, you're helping us make those decisions faster to dial back to what we were just talking about. Katy Wells, super talented, awesome podcast to listen to. Follow her on Instagram. We'll be sure to share all of your links wherever we share this podcast. And best yet, your kids can learn from her too in Life Skills Now Summer Camp, seasons 1 or 2 or 3. Whenever you're listening to this, she'll probably be back for 4 because she's got a bajillion tips to share with all of us. Thank you so much, Katy.
Thanks, Katy.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. I hope your brain feels fed and your heart feels full, and that you feel connected, knowing that there are other parents on this journey with you. We're just trying to raise healthy, independent adults. And the next time you think, man, there is no handbook for this job. Now there is the Healthy Parenting Handbook. Look up the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please leave a review, my friends, as that helps other parents who need this information to find us. And of course, subscribe. That's a huge help. You can also look for our shorts as a reel on Instagram at Katy Kimball Kids Cook, or subscribe to the Healthy Parenting Handbook Shorts channel on YouTube. You'll get those bite-sized portions of healthy parenting advice.